NBA free agency is always crazy, but this year in particular, there are so many teams that had such high expectations that didn't meet them that I think this particular free agency class is going to be incredibly interesting. There's going to be a ton of changes and maybe a lot of changes that none of us are going to expect. Really quickly though, I want to thank Raycon for sponsoring this video. And what I want to talk about today is the Raycon Everyday Earbuds, because for me personally, I need earbuds pretty much throughout my entire day, whether I'm going for a run, whether I'm listening to a podcast, whether I'm sitting at my desk and getting work done. Having something going on in the background is really, really helpful for me. And when it comes to going for a run or exercising, one of my favorite features about Raycon is the fact that they are water and sweat resistant. And then if I need to sit at my desk for a while, get some work done, they also have 8 hours of runtime. And not only does it have those great features, but also you're getting incredible value for what you're paying. Thanks to Raycon, you're paying half the price for the same, if not better quality earbuds. You can get a pair and then also a spare and still pay less than you would with some of those other more big name tech brands out there. So if you're someone like me that was constantly looking for some kind of consistent quality earbud solution, then Raycon has you covered today. Right now, you can click the link in the description or go to buyraycon.com/sporting to get 15% off your Raycon purchase. So if you're looking for quality earbuds at a great price, make sure to click that link in the description. And thank you again to Raycon for sponsoring this video. So I'm going to go through some players here that I think are the most interesting free agents. Where they could go is where it's just kind of what their situation is. And first and foremost for me is Draymond Green, a player that prior to a couple of months ago, I had assumed that Golden State would let him leave because there's a lot of just money issues here in terms of the new CBA carrying all these salaries, having him, Jordan Poole, Clay, Steph, Wiggins. They're the most expensive team in the league, and it's only going to continue to get more and more expensive. And Draymond offensively, even though obviously they were successful, won the title last year, offensively, he's really declined in terms of being any kind of a threat to score. But now there's been like a resurgence in the Draymond stuff, and I just have no idea what's going to happen with him. He has a player option for this offseason, and to me, there's two scenarios here. One, Golden State realizes that he is incredibly critical to what they do in terms of their success, and that there are other guys like Poole and maybe even Wiggins that are just less consequential to what they do and to how they end up winning these games. That Draymond is still a defensive player of the year caliber guy, despite the fact that he turned 34 this summer. And maybe you can talk him into a 3 or a 4 year deal that's not at the max, that feels a little bit more palatable to Golden State. The other option is either Golden State decides that they just need to save the money, or Draymond wants too big of a contract, in which case there's a lot of young teams around the league that I think are going to take a pretty hard look at bringing in Draymond Green to be just a veteran presence on their roster. So a team like Detroit has continually been linked to Draymond. A team like Houston is going to continue to be linked to him. And if he just wants to go to a new team, a new challenge, and get more money than he would from Golden State, those are the two options for him. And I really can't wait to see what team he goes to. Next up now is another crazy one, and it's James Harden. There's really only two scenarios here. Either James Harden stays in Philadelphia or he ends up going back to Houston. And there's been so many rumors about the Houston thing that I can't ignore it. Like it feels really far-fetched even now to talk about, but when you've been linked to a team this consistently that has the cap space, that is an up-and-coming young team, especially if they end up with Victor Wembanyama or whatever the case may be in the lottery, there's so many things here that could really point James Harden in the direction of Houston. Wants to win a title, has tried to do that in Brooklyn and Philadelphia, and even if he's unable to do that, maybe he just wants to come back home and come back to a team that can continue to grow and develop in a way that maybe Philadelphia can't. Right now, I would guess that he's going to return to Philly, but the threat of him going to Houston is very real. Next up now is a guy that people aren't really talking about, and I'm not sure why. Chris Middleton is going to be a free agent this offseason more than likely. He's got a player option, and even though he didn't have a great season, he's probably going to opt out of it and look for the next big money deal. And I'm not saying that Milwaukee is going to be excited to get rid of Chris Middleton, but when it comes to his lack of availability this year, him getting a little bit older, and maybe just taking this as an opportunity to shake up the roster around Giannis, there's a couple of really interesting Chris Middleton destinations. So from a free agency perspective, maybe a team like Sacramento could get involved. Again, some of these younger teams like Orlando, Houston, that have some cap space, but more likely it's either going to be he's going to return to Milwaukee, either opting in or on a new contract, or more interestingly to me in terms of how it can reshape the Bucks roster in a potential sign and trade. And that's, I think, going to be a theme of this offseason in particular. There's going to be a good amount of teams that are looking to sign and trade some of the free agents and change up their rosters because there's not a ton of cap space out there, but there's a good amount of interesting like near max players like Chris Middleton. And maybe there's a team like Dallas that would sign and trade for Chris Middleton, someone they've been interested in the past. Maybe a team like Portland, maybe even Golden State. Like there's just some really weird stuff that you can get into here, Chris Middleton. My guess would be that he's going to stay in Milwaukee, but if they really wanted to try and change the roster in a dramatic way after their first round exit against Miami, a Chris Middleton sign and trade is an interesting place to start. You want to talk about unpredictable. Next up on the list, Kyrie Irving. You guys tell me what you think is going to happen with Kyrie. Nobody nobody ever knows from week to week what's going to happen with Kyrie. It's either Dallas or a mystery team, because for a while we thought it was going to be the Lakers. I don't think it's going to be the Lakers at all now. They've got their own stuff going on, some of their own players that they'd like to retain. I don't like, again, maybe it's a sign and trade to a team like Miami or something strange like that. But more than likely, if Dallas steps up and offers Kyrie the full 4 or 5 year max, he's probably going to take it. And they're the most desperate team out there in terms of really needing Kyrie. They want to bring him back. They traded assets for him. I think he's going to stay in Dallas. But if Dallas doesn't want to give him the full max, kind of the way Brooklyn did, him just going to a different team, even for less than the max or on a 1 year deal or whatever, like anything's possible with Kyrie at any moment. And then you get into kind of the bottom half of this free agency class, but it's still a really interesting group. First and foremost, Russell Westbrook looked fantastic for the Clippers, especially in the postseason. And what does that mean for his free agency value? Is he someone that's going to be getting 10, 15, $20 million a year? Or, as is the case most of the time when you become a buyout player, as Russell Westbrook was this year, you just keep signing smaller contracts, like $5 million a year, basically. And for the Clippers really want to bring him back. Like, he provides them a dynamic backcourt player that they haven't had in the entirety of the time that Paul George and Kawhi Leonard have been there. And I would assume they want to continue to try and run this back one more time. Having Russ there, despite his spacing issues, really helps them, especially in regular season games in which Kawhi and Paul George might not play. They might be resting. But if he demands a bigger contract, if there's more of a market out there than we might expect, we could see Russell Westbrook in an Orlando Magic uniform next year, making $15 million a year. I have no idea. I wanted to go back to the Clippers because he had a ton of success there and looked like old Russ again. But again, there's really no way of telling exactly where he's going to end up. Another one, Kristaps Porzingis is suddenly like a pretty interesting and a pretty valuable free agent. Because it's Washington, my guess is they're just going to pay him a ton of money and re-sign him, and then he's going to start getting hurt again. It's interesting that he's healthy and really good in his contract year. That's always, a little bit of a red flag for me personally. But he was really good. Like, I mean, he was a borderline all-star caliber guy, can space the floor, can protect the rim, not as mobile as he was in his younger years defensively, but still pretty solid defensive player, and someone that is still very unique in terms of a player type throughout the league, and someone that I think there's going to be a good amount of interest in. Again, the problem being, if you're in this second tier of free agents, teams aren't saving cap space for second tier free agents. They're saving cap space for some of these top tier guys, and those teams that do have cap space are all kind of young and not that great. So again, unless it's like Sacramento or something, we're really going to be looking at a sign and trade. Miami's always a possibility. The Knicks are not a possibility for KP, but for sign and trades in general, he's a really interesting one. I think he's going to come back to Washington because they're just going to do what they do and try and win 43 games again next year. But no one's really talking about how interesting he is as a free agent. A couple of other guys here. D'Angelo Russell, I'm assuming he's going to return to the Lakers, but you never really know. Maybe there's a sign and trade there. Maybe that is the Kyrie destination. You swap those two guys between Dallas and the Lakers. But it seems like they're pretty happy with him, with what he provides to their team, and it looks like a natural fit for him as well. And then Nikola Vucevic is a free agent, by the way. Again, someone that people are just not talking about. Chicago's probably going to be motivated to retain him because they looked at least a little better down the stretch last year. They're going to move forward probably without Lonzo in their plans, which means they're probably not going to be that great, but they traded stuff for him. They're probably going to want to try and retain him, and the market shouldn't be too crazy to where they're going to have to pay him a ton of money. But that's just the start of this free agency class. I can make like a 25-minute video on all the other really interesting free agents in this class. This is really like the top two tiers though, and a group that you could tell me every one of these guys stays on their team, or you can tell me that every single one of them changes teams, and I would believe you either way. That's the interesting part about this free agency class. Teams are going to be looking to make changes, but given the lack of salary cap space, they might be able to retain their guys cheaper than they normally would. It's going to be an incredibly interesting free agency class.